Thanks to Sana Skin Studio for supporting the No podcast. Sana is a skin studio that is shifting the relationship with your skin and your products through goal-driven facials, real guidance, and clean skincare. Stay tuned for our promo code so you can receive $25 off of your first facial at Sana Skin Studio.
This episode of The No with Nikki Spo is brought to you by Toyota of North Miami.
Welcome to the No podcast with me, Nikki Spo.
What is up, my friends? You are listening to The No, where it is not about knowing everything, but about coming to know ourselves. I am your hostess, Nikki Spolstra, and today we are discussing something a little bit heavy, but you know me, we're going to go there because if it's mentionable, it is manageable. In today's episode, we are having a conversation around sexual abuse, assault, healing from trauma, and advocating for yourself and others. As many of you know, I have my own history with this topic, and I know that actually talking about it has helped me tremendously. So if you or anyone you know has gone through something like this, you may want to tap in. As always, check in with yourself as this topic can be super triggering. So move through this as you need to. Before I introduce you to today's inspiring guest, don't forget to subscribe to The No with Nikki Spo on whichever platform you're listening in on so you never miss an episode. All right, so I'm excited to introduce you all to Alreen Hayquist, a seasoned lawyer, author, and advocate on a mission to amplify voices and combat silence around abuse. With over 21 years of legal expertise, Alreen champions women facing sexual harassment, discrimination, and abuse, drawing from her own traumatic past to empower others. As the founder of Hayquist and Eck LLP in San Diego, she has successfully secured millions for clients in these cases. Alreen's recent book, Fired Up, Fueling Triumph from Trauma, illuminates her personal transformation and commitment to ending the cycle of silence. Her unwavering belief is that silence empowers gaslighting, drives her to inspire others to speak out against abuse, making for a quite compelling listen. Alreen, thank you for being here today. I always have mixed feelings when I tap into this conversation topic because of my own personal history with sexual and emotional abuse throughout my life. So as excited as I am to have the opportunity to speak with you for like a million reasons, I also had to sort of emotionally prepare to, be here in this space to address such a heavy topic and hold space for anyone in our audience who might be feeling the weight of it themselves. So thank you so much for being here and for being open to vulnerability and courage.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And thanks for recognizing that not only for yourself, but for your listeners as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that a lot of women have felt silenced in their lives, just in a very general way. I have, like all throughout my life, in almost every stage of my life. Why do you think that we as a sex feel that way? Do you think that men and women feel this way equally?
I don't feel like they feel it equally. I think for us, the silence comes either from our experiences that we've had. So abuse silence is a byproduct of sexual abuse or physical abuse or emotional abuse. And it's also societally, as women, we're supposed to be quiet and kind of the bystander in situations. So I think with both of those things, we've just been accustomed to, keeping ourselves in, our voice inside and not letting it shine.
You touched on it being something that is societal. So we have to consider then that it's generational and cultural, right? Like that so many generations before us, and depending especially on the cultures that we grew up in, that this has been exacerbated over time.
Yes, for sure.
And it's become like a way of being.
Yeah, exactly. Like for me, my mom was silent, my whole life. She never spoke up. She never said anything despite, the abuse by my dad. Looking back at her life, she was told, there was God, man, and her. And she was really just a piece of property that could be given away, however the man saw fit. So, and I had a long history of, her silence, and then me seeing her, keeping her silence is actually what prompted one of the reasons why I can't be silent. Like that is kind of the picture of what I don't want to be.
That's fascinating, because my mom was an alcoholic and I never wanted to be an alcoholic, right? I was like, I am not going to be an alcoholic. Over my dead body. Like I had really big issues with her and her alcoholism. And then slowly but surely, like I myself started to become just like her. And it, I finally took a step in my own life and I became sober because I was like, enough is enough. Like I'm going down this path where I'm becoming all the things that I don't like about her and about just people in that situation. I think it's kind of a sweeping generalization, but yeah, that's what prompted me to really, really seek help and stop living this lie. And for what it's worth, like it was a secret. My alcoholism was a super secret. Like I kept that secret. I didn't own up to that. I talk about this a lot on my show, Alreen, is that like keeping secrets is like drinking poison. Like it really poisons us from the inside out.
That's correct. Like silence is the only person you're hurting is yourself. Like you're not hurting anybody else. And if you're already hurting, you're just continuing on this path. So if you want something different out of your life, you need to not keep it a secret. You know, you need to start speaking out as to what happened. And I know, you know, that's sometimes so overwhelming for people. Like they don't want to let it out. It's part of survival in essence. And so I always say, like, just start with simple things. Just write it out on a piece of paper, in a journal, like to yourself. And it doesn't have to be this big thing where you tell everybody, you know, about something you've kept inside for so long.
Well, to your point about survival, I think that for so long, it's like if you, and I'll speak for myself in this regard, but if I didn't talk about it, then it's not real, right? And so there is some survival mechanism in there, like at play, where if I just don't acknowledge it, it's like I'm an ostrich and I have my head in the sand and then it's not real. I remember actually, Alreen, thinking to myself, like, did I make it up? You know that? Like I actually used to play games in my head with myself and be like, no, you made it up. It actually didn't happen that way. I would gaslight myself.
And sometimes it's easier.
Right. It was easier. And I think that addressing it takes a tremendous amount of courage to even say it out loud to yourself. But then actually say it out loud, like, and own it publicly is very scary.
And for me, it's something I wanted to do. It was just, you know, I try to repress it. I try to keep it quiet. I try to stick it down deep inside. I try to forget about it, pretend it was just a false memory, but my body didn't forget. And that's really what it just kept going. My body just kept, you know, shouting at me that this is not okay. And what are you going to do about it?
So how did that manifest, right? Like, we hear that a lot, like, and you know, there's this whole book on it, like the body keeps the score. How did that present for you?
For me, it was bleeding. It was my colon wouldn't stop bleeding. So it was a very, you know, very physical manifestation that I'd have to see every day with blood. And I'd go to my doctor, my GI doctor, and luckily, you know, she didn't just try to give me medicine. She just kept going with, you need to feel, you know, what happened to you. And I just couldn't even process what that meant. Like, stop saying feel. Like, I feel plenty. What do you want me to do? And she kept reminding me, like, you're so out of touch with it. You can't even recognize something that's so primal. Kudos
to her for even encouraging you to feel it out. Because I feel like there are a lot of professionals out there that they're just so focused on like the medical training part of it that they're like, okay, well, this is why, and we're going to find a solution for XYZ. Obviously, we're not every doctor is going to be like that, but kudos to her for taking the time to really listen to you and notice that and like urge you in that direction.
I would be mad at her, like, what? How do you not care about this? And she's like, I'm a doctor, I have all the tools, but that's not your issue, you know? And people talk about psychosomatic and they think psychosomatic is like, it's just in your head. But it's not necessarily that it's just in your head. You could be having a physical manifestation, but it's not caused by something physically wrong with you. It could be tied to something in your past that you're not addressing. And so with her, she luckily, she was like, I don't know what else to do with you. And she sent me to a cranial sacral healer who does energy work. We did inner child work. And the idea being, you know, you have to come in touch with how you felt while the traumatic experience was going on and stop trying to repress it, because that's a part of you. And that's the reason your body's having these physical manifestations, is because you're fighting your body and with yourself. And so instead of trying to fight it, you know, you need to absorb it. And that's where the feelings of the situation come into play.
It's really heavy work. I've done some of that work myself. And I remember feeling exhausted going into therapy sessions, like before I even started them. I'm like, I don't want to. It's like when you're going to do like a crazy workout and after your workout, you usually feel better. Like, I don't know that in the beginning of me dealing with this shit that I felt better afterwards. It was almost like I felt more traumatized afterwards. And what's crazy about that is I think that doing the work is so scary right? And even when you make the effort, you tiptoe into it. I tiptoed into it, and then I was left even more terrified and felt even more traumatized after like my initial stepping into it. And I personally didn't reap benefits until like much longer after, and just practicing it. I remember I had a therapist who like made me say it like standing backwards and like laying down and like closing my eyes and all these different things until it just didn't have the same impact on me as it once did. And I remember also having to do this inner child work. And that's probably one of the saddest things I've ever personally had to do, because you see that little girl inside of you and you're like, you see how scared she was and how much she needed an adult who would advocate for her, or, you know, whatever it was that a person needed at that time in their lives. And you have to kind of show up and say to yourself, I'm that person for you now, right? Like I talked to little Nikki and I'm like, I got you, girl. Like, yeah. I got you. I'm here now. The adult, the trustworthy adult, she's here. I'm her. And I got you.
Yeah. I mean, that's still like that moment. I experienced the exact same thing, and it gets me every time. And letting that little girl know, like, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like, everything's going to be okay, you know? So yes, it's very powerful work. Agree. It's very hard. It doesn't just heal you, you know, right away. That's so powerful for you to move on, I think. You know, I feel like that was a huge step for me. It was very transformative.
I also now, things happen in my life and I'm like, I got you. I'm like, because, you know, like these little triggers, like most of my emotional triggers, I think stem from like things I experienced in childhood, not just sexual abuse, but like literally anything that happened from when I was a kid or an adolescent or young adult. I'm like, all of these experiences we have in our whole life, they shape us right into who we are in this moment. And so now when things happen that are difficult for me or scary for me, I'm like, dude, you've gotten through all of the things so far, right?
Yeah, and you've developed a toolbox. You're developing tools to,
yes,
you know, get through this.
Absolutely. So, Alreen, I want to talk about gaslighting. And so, like narcissism, which is a legitimate, real thing, gaslighting is a real thing. However, I want to note that, like, with the rise of access to what people are calling therapy talk, I think socially, we've seen a rise in the misuse of the terms narcissism and gaslighting. Like, maybe they're not actually a narcissist. Maybe they're just a self-centered asshole. We have so much access because of COVID. You know, all the therapists were coming up and speaking up, you know, and then, you know, you have therapists talking about it, but you also have bozos out there talking about it. And then there's just like all this information. And so now everybody is walking around diagnosing everyone else as a narcissist, and that's a gaslighting. So really, let's talk about this. What is gaslighting?
Gaslighting is making you believe that what you're feeling and thinking, your experiences aren't real, or they're your fault for having them occur.
And how does that present?
So I'll give you an example in my own life. So as I mentioned, my father was very abusive, and my mom not only was silent and would watch it, right, and not say anything. So one, you start thinking it's fine. But two, she would tell me how ungrateful I was to even question him or be bothered by what he was doing, because he wasn't throwing me out on the street. So she switched it around on me, that I was a problem for even, you know, wanting things to be different, or where I would question, you know, his behavior. She would turn it around on me as that I was a problem. And so that is a form of gaslighting, turning it around on me so that I think I'm the problem, so that I stay silent when he is being abusive.
Because you should be grateful that you have a roof over your head.
Correct. He didn't throw me out on the street.
Right.
That was lit.
Which is wild, because like I always think about, in the world of gaslighting, in the work that I've done with dealing with gaslighting, like two things can be true at one time. You could be putting a roof over my head, and also it could be like severely fucked up that you're sexually assaulting me. Just because what is happening doesn't mean that it makes the other one okay. And what's wild about, I think, gaslighting in general is that, you know, and I'm talking about in a much less aggressive and severe way, but when two people are arguing, let's take an argument, just a regular argument, for example. Like, there are two subjective realities that are occurring, right? There is person one's subjective reality, how they experienced the confrontation or the exchange of words, and then there's person two's subjective reality of how things went down. And so when I think about gaslighting, I think about someone trying to convince you that your subjective reality is not what was real.
Yeah.
Whether there's like convincing of other things, and it sounds like in your experience, your parent was trying to convince you to like not just not feel threatened and sad and unsafe, but then to also like don't feel those things, but actually feel grateful and happy, right? But it can happen on a much less severe scale where somebody's just like completely manipulating you into trying to think that like what you felt or what you experienced isn't real. And in the realm of just regular arguments, like you can disagree about how things went down, but how you felt about how things went down, that's kind of like non-negotiable. And so you think about how you felt. I talked about how like I would think to myself, oh my gosh, did I make that up in my head? Did I make that up in my head? Did I make the sexual abuse that occurred as a child? Did I make that up in my head? First of all, the answer is no, I didn't make it up, right? So let's just get that out of the way. But even if I had, maybe if it wasn't as severe or whatever, the reality is that it still had a lasting impact on my life. So now what do you do with that? What do you do with those feelings?
You acknowledge them that they're real, and this person isn't going to tell you that you shouldn't have them or they were wrong. They are your feelings, and they're valid feelings, and you're allowed to have them, and you should give give yourself the space to have them. Like, I think that's really important. And I see that in my work as well, right? Like in the sexual assault, sexual harassment cases, the first thing a woman does is, well, did that really happen? Am I reading into it too much? Did he really mean to do that? An accident? Maybe I shouldn't have been there. Maybe it was my fault for being in that situation. I shouldn't have said this to him. Maybe I let him on,
That's right.
All of it turns to her.
Right.
You're like, no. Let's back up. How did that make you feel? If that made you uncomfortable, you know what makes you feel uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable in that situation, then it's not okay. So that's another form of gaslighting. It's not like in your face, but we have been trained to kind of just take it all on ourselves, that it's our fault for being in that situation.
So how is silencing the biggest form of gaslighting?
Because by silencing yourself and not saying anything, you're just allowing the conduct to perpetuate. Right? You're letting that person get away with it, or not letting them, like recognize what they did was not okay. And like you've protected them this whole time.
I have a big beef with being kept silent. Like I do not fuck with being kept silent. I don't mess with it. I have a very severe aversion to it. I feel like numerous times in my life, I have been asked to keep secrets that weren't healthy for me, secrets that I knew I shouldn't be keeping. And every single time I've done that in my life, it's just had really, really negative repercussions for me as a human being. It's almost like a soul-crushing experience for me to keep secrets. And I always tell my kids that like any safe adult is not going to ask you to keep a secret. And it's been wild because even like, with a babysitter or whatever, I say we don't say keeping secrets. We don't keep secrets in this house. And if you're trying to surprise somebody, a surprise is something different than a secret. Like my birthday is coming up. My kids are like, we have something for you. It's a secret. I'm like, oh, you mean you're trying to give me a surprise? You're trying to surprise me. It's not a secret. We don't keep secrets, And I think that just like really introducing this type of language and the way that we use language to our children can be hugely empowering, so that they know that it's okay to speak up and that keeping secrets isn't really good for our bodies and our minds.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what kind of happens is you're led to believe like if you tell the secret, like you'll be the problem. People will judge you. People won't like you. And so you have to keep it inside, because what will people think? And it won't be that they will see that the situation was wrong or this person did something wrong, but you start to believe if people find out the secret, you're the problem. And that's, I think, again, a byproduct of abuse or the traumatic event, where you start believing like, well, I have to stay silent because if I'm not silent, then, people won't love me, or I won't be accepted, or people will judge me. And that was like a very big turning point. Like, no, you actually will start feeling better by not keeping the secret. And you don't get more traumatized by letting it out. You actually start healing from the trauma by letting it out.
I think that there's a lot of shame wrapped up in it too, right? That like when you're talking about, oh no, you will be the problem if you come out and tell, there's a lot of shame in that. Like you will be the problem. That is shameful, you know? And I think that especially women, when we think about like everything that you were saying, like, is it my fault? Is it this? Was I dressed too provocatively? Would I blah, blah, blah. It really comes down to us feeling ashamed about ourselves.
Yeah.
And like, I think that shame, it plays an integral role in the secret keeping process for us as women.
Agreed. But that by starting to not keep silent and start letting it out, I think is how we can get out of that and stop kind of the generational pattern of keeping it in.
All right, guys, let's take a quick break so I can thank our sponsor, Sana Skin Studio, with their OG location in Wynwood and their additional locations in Fort Lauderdale and Coconut Grove. Okay, so the best way I can describe Sana is that it feels like coming home. Unlike traditional facials, Sana's facials are rooted in education, and I love this so much. Every experience I have had at Sana has been a chance for me to learn more about my skin and its needs. I love that the facials are effective while also being accessible enough to be a monthly ritual rather than a yearly splurge. This is why the Sana membership is so great. I'm honored to be able to provide our audience with a promo code. Use the code THENOGLOW for $25 off of your first facial when booking at sanaskinstudio.com and additional incentives if you book a membership. I have absolutely loved my skin healing journey with Sana Skin Studio. Let's take a quick break so I can tell you all about today's presenting sponsor. In case you missed it, I am loving my new Toyota Tundra, which has really opened up a world of possibilities for me and has facilitated so many fun projects at home and is letting me go all the places. When shopping for a new car, Toyota of North Miami has to be at the top of your list. Toyota of North Miami is a Miami-based dealership that offers you a superior selection of new Toyota vehicles, as well as a large inventory of used vehicles and certified pre-owned Toyotas. Toyota of North Miami is conveniently located off of I-95, not far from North Miami Beach, and their storefront has more than 85,000 square feet of shopping space. With so much room, they always have more than 1,000 vehicles in stock at all times, including popular models like the Toyota Camry, Toyota RAV4, Toyota Corolla, and the Toyota Prius. There is a kids room, so you know that made my life easier. And overall, their vehicle experts are kind, informative, and offer superior customer service. Right now, you can lease a new Toyota Corolla for just $79 a month and get free car washes for life. For life. Be sure to check out Toyota of North Miami for all of your car purchasing needs.
Hay que tratar muy bien a los clientes y también ofrecemos free car washes for life.
Free car washes for life? Free car washes for life!
Lease a new Toyota Corolla for just $79 a month and receive free car washes for life.
So let's talk about the idea that women are under attack sexually. I think this is very broad, right? But I want to hear your take on it.
Sure. So this idea that, you know, that's what women are there for. Women are there as sexual objects. Women are there to have babies. I mean, we're kind of being attacked right now as we get our power, you know, by our reproductive rights. I mean, that's happening all over the country. And it's an attack on us, our choices, our bodies. And so what are we going to do about it? And I think that's happening because, you know, there are people that are scared of our power and as we come into being able to make decisions for ourselves. And so, again, by staying silent, we're just kind of perpetuating the problem. And so I think speaking out is very important.
The pendulum swings hard in both directions in a lot of ways, right? So women are under attack, and now women start to stand up and advocate for themselves, and the Me Too movement happens, and now people are rolling their eyes at people who are saying Me Too.
Yeah. And so you gotta keep going, right? You can't then you can't shrink back.
Yeah, well, we're not going back to where we came from, so me fucking too. Like, like, I don't know what to tell you. That sucks that it makes you uncomfortable, that I was made to feel so uncomfortable, but you're going to have to sort through that, Papa.
Exactly. Because we're not stopping. So
we're not stopping. No.
We're
And
not
I think
stopping.
that's part of why it's so important for people like me and you to have these conversations on air so that other people who are listening, if it impacts one person, like we'll have done our jobs today, in helping somebody feel a little bit more seen, maybe have a little bit more courage. I sometimes find myself struggling with the word abused. Like I struggle big with it because I hear it and I immediately start to identify as a victim, which of course, when the bad things were happening, I was a victim, right? And there's a part of me that I allowed it to happen in some weird world that I lived in. I allowed it to happen. So maybe not so much when I was a child, but then in other ways that I kept secrets throughout my adolescence and then throughout my my young adulthood, I allowed some of these secrets to take place. And I kept the secrets, even though I knew it didn't feel good to me. But it's a lot to sift through emotionally and psychologically, not just in your heart, but like in your mind. It's a mind fuck because while I may have been victimized, like today I don't identify as a victim, right? And I think that when we hear the word victim, I think that there's like a connotation that somebody is weak or we should feel pity or sorry for them. And I don't identify with that. I struggle with the word victim, even though it's a very real thing.
I agree. I don't believe I'm a victim. I think I'm very privileged to be able to do the work I did, but I recognize there is tools and effort that had to go into it, right? It didn't just happen overnight. I was definitely at a place in my life where I felt sorry for myself and couldn't figure out how to get out of the situation. Even then, though, I didn't look at myself as a victim. I just looked at it as part of my life. But I think it's going through the work and recognizing that stuff was, effed up. And now you got to clean it up. Now you are responsible for cleaning up the mess. And I think that for me, that was like the process of being really angry, not about what happened to me, but angry that I had to deal with the messed up thoughts.
You made this mess,
I got to deal with it. Yeah.
And I have to clean it up.
Yeah.
You did this, and now I have to clean it.
Yeah. And so that
infuriating.
It's infuriating of having to do the work. I didn't put the victim, I guess, mentality like poor me. It was like I was mad and I wanted to do something different. And just couldn't figure out how to do something different, and so that's why I was trying a bunch of different things. And I think working through therapy is a very, that's also very healing. And I think very important.
Well, I think also something that you're doing and something that I feel like I'm doing in some capacity is helping other people, right? So like a lot of 12-step programs is commonly to help another whatever who is still sick and suffering. And that's part of what keeps people sober. That's part of what keeps people out of their active addiction, right? And so I want to know how, from a lawyer's perspective, you are helping those who have been abused.
Yeah, so we have a law firm in San Diego, and we help women stand up for themselves because it is really scary going up against your abusers for all the things we talked about, right? The attack is always threefold. It's always one, to deny that it happened. 2, it's to say you wanted it. And then 3, it's to attack your credibility and who you are. Knowing that that's what you have to go through, we have a team that supports you through the process. And that's why it's really important for me to tell my story, because I wanting to let them know, like, I understand how this process is, right? They have to come out publicly with what happened to them. They have to confront their abuser. But at the end of the day, after you do that, and I've seen this time and time again, of how empowering that act is, but having a support system and a team behind you, kind of like your people, like your posse, you need your tribe behind you when you do something big. When you have that and you go forward at the end of it, you are empowered and you find your voice and kind of can step forward in a way that you hadn't before. And to me, I think that's super important, and why I wrote the book, why I go on these podcasts, why I'm writing about, talking about my abuse. It's because I want women to know you could talk about it, and it actually is how you're going to get to the next step and live, the life that you didn't think you were deserving of or didn't think you could have. And so that's what we do here at the firm every day. And I also, I think it's really important for women to know, like, there is all of these laws that support you. Like, as a society, we all agree sexual abuse, sexual assault, sexual harassment, however you want to call it, is wrong. And we have these rules and laws in place. And just because somebody is violating them and making you think that you are the cause of it, that's not true. And we're here to stand up with you, to tell the person or the institution that harmed you that that's not true and that's not okay. And if you do that, you are going to have to deal with the consequences of it.
I think that you said something that was really important that I want listeners to pay attention to, is that you mentioned like having your posse, right? Like your people that believe you and stand up with you. And I previously hosted, well, actually it was one of my earliest podcast episodes with Dr. Andrea Loeb, who is a trauma psychologist who specializes in sexual abuse. She said that the biggest determining factor on a person's ability to heal from their sexual trauma experience is whether or not they are believed. And so she gave an example in that episode of two people, right? Person A and person B. Person A was raped by a family member, penetrated and raped by a family member, and person B was forced to watch pornography with a family member as well. On the scale of severity, most people might say that being forced to watch porn is less severe on the scale of sexual abuse than being penetrated against your will. Most people would agree on that. Now, what Dr. Andrea Loeb went on to explain was that person A, who had been penetrated against their will, when that person came out and told, that person was believed. And that changed the trajectory of that person's healing journey. That person was able to heal at a much faster pace and rate. While person B, when they came out and said, oh, so-and-so forced me to watch porn and was not believed, that person internalized this and started second-guessing themselves and then had a much longer healing process. Did they both get there? Maybe. These are theoretical examples that she has given based on her years and years of experience dealing with this. But it is so important to have people in your corner who believe you.
Agreed.
I know what it's like to come out and not be believed. And it is excruciating because then you have to try to convince people you've been hurt. And that's just, it's really such a horrible, toxic place to be in.
I totally agree. And that's why, one, here at the office, we obviously hear you and we believe you, every woman that comes through us. But it's also important, kind of like your circle of people. It could be family members, it could be friends. And if you're surrounded by people who are questioning you and not believing you or asking you why you did X, Y, and Z, maybe you need to give them, some boundaries or give them some space while you go through this process.
Absolutely. So how can people begin to heal from the trauma that is caused by sexual violence? Your work, obviously, you're not a therapist, but you work with these people all the time. So what are the steps that you encourage your clients to take?
So step one is number one, I always think, is the awareness, right? It's recognizing that it happened, saying it happened, writing it down that it happened, like not pretending like it didn't or telling yourself it didn't or kind of shoving it away. So awareness, write it down, tell a friend, let it out, right? I always think that's super important. 2, get clear on what it is that you want to do. Why are you doing this? Why are you wanting to heal from it? I think getting clear on that is very important because that's going to get you through the steps as to why you're doing it. So for me, kind of what we were talking about earlier, I did just want to shove it down. I wanted to repress it. I didn't want to talk about it. One of the things my doctor kept saying, she's like, you need to start telling yourself you don't want to. Not that you can't, but you don't want to because it's so painful. But I did it because of the physical manifestations in my body and because I wanted a better relationship, with my husband and my daughter. I mean, it affects everything in your life, and so the people that I love the most, it was getting in the way for that. So getting really clear on like why I want to deal with it. The abuse happened. I can't change that.
Right.
And there's consequences to it, but I have the power to change the consequences and the trajectory of the way this is going. So I think that's really important, is getting clear on why you want to do it. And then it's starting to take steps to get there, right? Building your team. I think having a therapist, is a great start. I feel like people don't know how to get in touch with a therapist, and there's a lot of like different tools online for you to help maybe find one, and recognizing you might go to a therapist just because it doesn't work, doesn't mean therapy doesn't work. It might have been the therapist, or it's the fact that you've only given it one session. When I first started therapy, I was, especially as like a functioning adult, I thought I'd go into therapy, I'd have 4 sessions, I'd talk about my problems, and I'd be on my way. And that's not how therapy works. It's a journey, right?
Yeah.
There's not an end point, and recognizing there's not an end point to your healing journey. And so, try that. And if that doesn't work, try a different tool. And talking to, I think, other people, like having this podcast, like talking to other people that have been in your space. So this idea that overnight, I had trauma, I recognized I had some consequences, and overnight, I felt wonderful about my life. And that's not how it works. It's a long game. And so talking to people that have had those experiences, I think is really empowering. And then I didn't do litigation, but taking a stand of some sort, right? Like whether it be standing up to your abuser, telling your story, sharing what happened to you with other people, I think is healing in and of itself.
When you're talking about speaking to people, I think it's really important to look for therapists that specialize in an area. Not everybody is equipped to handle your experience. And I think that finding in this situation a therapist who specializes in trauma recovery and even more specifically when it comes to sexual abuse, I think that that's key. Just the way I think it's key to speak to a therapist who specializes in, borderline personality disorder, if that's what it is. You can't, and I say this about relationships and men a lot, but I'm you can't go to the hardware store if you're shopping for apples. They don't sell apples at the hardware store. They sell tools, so you're in the wrong store. You got to go to the right store.
That's such a good point. The therapist that I started seeing, it's psychodynamic therapy, but he specializes in child development. And so that was really good for me because as I had my daughter, who's now, she's going to be 12 in a couple of months, from the time she was a baby, there was just all these triggers, her crying, made me chill, her, being naked made me uncomfortable.
I totally relate to those things too.
Yeah. And so specializing in somebody that can kind of help me through the process of the development that I didn't receive as a child and what she's going through was really helpful, as to become a better parent to her.
There was a period of time where I was a new mom. It was my first baby and I did not want to clean my child's diaper because I didn't want to touch his penis.
Yep.
Right? Because I'm no. I'm freaking out. I'm no, I don't want to touch it. I don't want to do anything. No. Right? Those were my own experiences. And that was hard. That was hard for my family to understand, because get over it, right? You get to clean his diaper. You're a mom. That's what you're supposed to do. I'm I don't think you guys get it. I make light of it and it's not light, but these are real things that people deal with, and it's hard. And so you said talking to people, and this is something that I think it definitely helps me with my alcoholism and my recovery is support groups. I remember there was a time where I was you couldn't pay me enough money to go talk in a support group. I'd be nope, absolutely not. And honestly, doing that is what changed my life. Just listening to other people's testimonies and hearing how other people have overcome it and thrived, not just overcome it, but they're thriving individuals and they are happy, joyous, and free now. Not only did they just get over it or whatever, they dealt with it, but they're happy, right? And at peace with themselves, maybe at peace with what happened. And that doesn't mean you accept it or like it, but at peace, I'm okay now, I'm on the other side. So I think support groups are really, really important. And I think it's, really scary to confront your abuser. I have not done that in my past with a certain person, and I have done it with an experience. And I will say that even just saying it out loud to that person, I was this is what happened. I am really clear on what you did. And that person could deny it until they're blue in the face. I don't care. I know, and I know that person knows, and that person knows that I know. And so in some way, shape, or form, I've released something within myself that has allowed me to move on past it.
Exactly. And I don't mean this in I want you to go forgive somebody. I don't think forgiveness is the thing. It's just letting it out of yourself and letting the person know and letting it out, say, that was not okay. That's what happened to me. And that is the empowering part of it.
I think so. I think you're spot on with that. I think that really is the empowering part of it, because I remember walking away from that exchange and being I just did that. I don't care if that person thinks I'm crazy. I don't care if that person has to lie to themselves to make themselves feel like that wasn't real and that didn't happen or whatever. If you need to, like, I don't care what you need to believe about your life that helps you sleep at night. Like, I sleep better now. Let's close, Alreen, with telling our audience about a little bit about your book, why the book Fired Up is such an important read, and where people can find you.
Sure. So my book's called Fired Up, Fueling Triumph from Trauma. They can find me on my website at alreen.com, and there's a free introduction chapter in the book if they want to check it out. But I think it's important to read to show you that by saying something, to not keeping things a secret, to letting out, talking about your past or your trauma or your abuse, whatever it might be, is how you're going to get yourself on a path of healing. And I talk about various ways that I've been on my healing journey. I'm not saying it's a guideline of what you should do, but I'm showing you by speaking out is definitely one way to get you on the path that you need to be.
Well, Alreen, thank you so much for your time and for your vulnerability and for your courage to be here with me today, and hopefully give our listeners some encouragement and some courage of their own, some support. I think this is a really hard thing to talk about, and I admire you for doing that hard work.
Thank you. And likewise for you having this podcast and having all these guests on it to talk about the same.
Thank you.
This podcast was brought to you by Sana Skin Studio. Be sure to use my code, TheNoGlow, for $25 off of your first facial at Sana when booking via sanaskinstudio.com. More than a skin studio, Sana is a movement towards healthier skin and self-love.
This episode of The Know with Nikki Spo was brought to you by Toyota of North Miami.
Thank you so much for listening to The Know. If you loved this episode, go ahead and share it with a friend. Words are so powerful, and someone may need to hear what we covered today. And if you really loved this episode, please take a moment to rate the show and leave a review. Your comments are so important and valued, and they give other listeners insight on what to expect on The Know. You can connect with me personally via Instagram at Nikki Sap Spo and The Know with Nikki Spo. My hope for you today is that you are fearless in looking inward so that you can be your highest, most authentic self and go after the life of your dreams.